Welcome to Malachi's Message Toxic Mold Sex Story Series, co-hosted by the co-founders of Malachi's Message, Emily Rochelle and Elizabeth Kern. Here we will be interviewing and hearing from people who have been through mold. We hope that this helps others feel not alone, not crazy, and that it gives them the strength, hope, and resources that they need to continue on in their journey. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Malachi's Message, Toxic Mold Sex Stories. I'm Elizabeth Kripe, Executive Director and co-founder of Malachi's Message. Co-hosting today is Emily Rochelle, co-founder and board director of Malachi's Message. We want to say thank you to Biotex Inspections. They're out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're looking for a mold inspection company, check them out, please. They've been amazing corporate sponsors to us. Today we have just honestly such a privilege. We get to interview Keri Huth. She is a mom, a wife. She has been through the ringer with moles. And man, we are so excited to talk to you, hear your story, and kind of put a focus on how mold really impacts relationships. Keri, thank you so much. I know this has been a long time coming. We've rescheduled a few times to make sure we can get this in. So I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keri, so much for coming on. I'll let Elizabeth start. You go.
Oh, no, it's okay. So before we kind of dive into your mold journey and how it's impacted relationships, could you give us a little bit of a background into what your life looked like before y'all started the process with mold?
Okay, so before we moved in our moldy home without knowing it was our moldy home, I love to eat. I love to go out with friends and go into any building I wanted to. I didn't have any worries about toxins. I didn't even and mold and what it can do. I mean, I grew up in military housing and I knew that I was affected by mold, and I knew I have a childhood illness of mold, but it didn't affect me. That was when I was a child. And as I got older, I was able to, life was great. Like I could eat what I want. I could go where I want. I could talk to who I wanted to. I could live wherever I wanted to. Like life before mold was so different than life after mold. I didn't have the stressors that I have today. I don't have what I PTSD before mold.
So when you went through mold this most recent time, I know our focus is on relationships and how it impacts your marriage and relationships, but can you kind of give a brief little rundown of your mold story?
Okay, so we bought a house. I'll just back up a little bit. I just got married. We had a blended family. So it was mine, his, and ours. And we bought a home in Allen. And within like 6 months, our health started going downhill. Like we couldn't figure it out. I started having really bizarre symptoms. My oldest son constantly had repeated upper respiratory infections. My husband had a lot of fatigue. He dealt with anxiety, depression, rage. I ended up being really emotional. I felt like I was dealing with PMS every day. I mean, the symptoms just go on and on and on. And we didn't understand what was going on. So for 5 years, we lived in this home, not knowing that our house was making us sick. We ended up finding somebody that came in and told us that we actually had mold growing in our HVAC. And I didn't have any knowledge necessarily besides what the person told me. And so they just said, we're just going to scrub it, clean it, and then pretty much spray something in it. And so I didn't know any difference. I was like, okay. And they did it, and it ended up making us worse. It ended up really, I guess, making us sicker. We ended up deciding to sell because what we wanted to do was build a home on 50 acres because we wanted to build me a home that would be good for me. And so we disclosed the information that we found to the people that were building our house and let them know. And they were like, oh, we're not worried about mold. And we sold the house. And then the journey just continues. So after that, I moved to an apartment, and we took our stuff with us because we didn't know that the stuff could make me sick and continue to make me sick. And so we moved into an apartment, and I started feeling really good and feeling great again, like I was before mold. And then all of a sudden I started getting sick again. I couldn't understand what it was. Well, that's when I really started diving into mold and researching and trying to learn about what's going on, and come to find out all of our stuff was contaminated. So we ended up moving it into storage. And so after that, it just was like, I feel like we just started moving from one place to another place to another place. And every place I went to was causing me to be sick, or it was moldy, and I didn't know what to do. And come to find out, I was just really hypersensitive. And through that journey, it's like every 6 months we were in a different place. And every time we had to start over with our items because I didn't want to contaminate the new space. And it was just this endless cycle that we were doing. And then we ended up thinking, okay, let's just buy an RV, move out on the land, and then we could start building our home. So that was, and that's when COVID hit. So that was our goal. We bought the RV, we lived in it, ended up finding out it had mold in it, and the mold that was in the RV was in myself and my child's body. So then COVID hit. My husband is a fireman, so we were worried about COVID, and with my son's chronic illness, we decided to move in with my mom until for like a month to see what COVID would do. And then that's when, things started going bad for my husband and I. We ended up going through a divorce. And then after about a year of fighting, my husband decided that he wanted to reconcile. So we're now a year later and working on reconciliation. And the mold journey has affected our marriage in so many different ways. So that's kind of just a quick, fast synopsis of our mold story.
Your husband, was he as affected as you?
So my husband is a better detoxer than I am.
Okay.
But I think was a little bit in denial. Like he'll say that he could tell he experienced fatigue, and he would have debilitating headaches when he would come home. But we didn't put 2 and 2 together. Like when he would go to work, he didn't have these headaches, but when he came home, he had these headaches that would just go through like the top of his skull all the way to his back. And he would just want to lay around and do absolutely nothing, and had a lot of anxiety, dealt with depression. And I think that some of those things were underlying, but I think the mold made it worse.
Did you feel whenever he was coming home and having headaches and he was tired? Because I kind of felt like this is what happened with my husband, is that his symptoms he felt were because of me just going crazy trying to figure out what was going on. And so I felt like I was now his problem, causing his headaches and, tiredness and other stuff. Did you kind of feel that way too?
Well, when we first lived in the house for the first 5 years, I didn't even know about mold really, or research it. So at that point, I was able to be normal in a way. I just bloated every day and I had all these different symptoms, but I think he was frustrated because I kept going to doctors and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And I kept trying this route and it wouldn't work. And we tried a different route and he was getting frustrated. But I don't believe that our issues, like we had issues in the home, but we didn't relate them to the mold until after we left the house, I guess is what I'm trying to explain. Is in the home, we had, the rage and we had all these symptoms, but we couldn't correlate that our house was what was pretty much killing us and making us so sick. But once we left, that's when I started researching, and then I became the burden and I had issues. And then, he would get frustrated because he'd come home from work and I would get sick from him from the fire station because they were moldy and I could feel it. And so a lot of our problems with mold started after we sold our home. Because we knew that was the cause of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you guys figured out that it was mold, that a lot of your symptoms have been associated with mold, were you guys already fairly like on different terms? So at that point, it wasn't this sigh of relief collaboratively, like, oh, we finally know the answer. This is what has been causing the tension. Or was there already so much division there because of everything that had gone on with mold that it was kind of like a stop for you guys?
It was somewhat both, because we already had the issues because the behaviors that we were experiencing toward each other were very toxic. Yeah. The yelling, my irritability. I mean, I was not a nice person. it changed who I was. It made me very irritable. It made me very moody. It made me very nasty in my tone. And then I would just like lose it and get angry, and we'd have explosions. And then he would like explode back at me. So it was a very toxic relationship in the home, but we didn't know why. Like, because we were dating before the house, we didn't have these issues. And we're like, what is going on? That once we left the mold, we still, I think that the resentment was there, the bitterness, the anger, and then moving and being inconsistent and having to live somewhere different every 6 months. And when we moved to my mom's, it got even worse. So then my husband started dealing with PTSD, and he started dealing with suicidal thoughts. We moved into my mom's house, and her mold was a lot worse. It was all behind the wall of her shower. So the 6 months that we were there, it was even more intense than our home. Then he started dealing with suicide. And then we started sleeping separately, because the bedroom I was sleeping in, I was reacting in it. And so I started sleeping in another room. So that created a huge wedge between us. And then after we left my mom, we moved into another house. And I again started having issues. He calls it like issues. I'm reacting again. It's all in my head. That's when I started having more hypersensitivity to, like, I couldn't go into grocery stores, and I couldn't go to people's homes because I would react. So that really escalated our relationship to be even more intense, because then he started doubting me and not trusting me. And he says, it doesn't matter where we live, you're going to have issues. This is all in your head. Those kind of things started happening at that point. So it intensified, I think, because of the instability of us having to constantly change and throw away so much. And he was the one that worked and provided for our family. And he's like, I've already wasted $10,000 starting over, and now we got to start over again. It was just really intense financially on our marriage, as well as between us.
I can't imagine how you probably felt, like, because everything now is evolving around you and your sensitivities. And
yes, it's all,
yeah, like, I'm now the problem. You feel like
I was a burden. Right. I was a burden. Like, we couldn't go out to eat. I couldn't eat certain foods. We were trying to figure out why all these foods were causing me to have problems. We spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover alternative treatments. I went down to the environmental health place in Dallas. So I started doing antigen treatment. And so we were spending tons of money, and yeah, I was a burden. All of my kids could have a normal life if it wasn't for me. My oldest went to a school that was moldy. It didn't affect him, but he would come home and get in the car, and I'd start my reactions. It would literally knock me out to where I would almost have to go home and lay down because of him. So then everybody had to come in the house and shower. Everybody had to come in, and we had to put their backpacks out on the patio. Like, life was normal, and it was extremely stressful for everybody in the house. But I feel like more so for my husband, because he looked at me like, I think he looked is what he has expressed is that he thought it was all in my head. And he doubted everything that I said. And there was no support. He went into a place, and he had a hat. I can just remember this. He had a hat on, and I was like, I feel like I'm reacting to you. And he's like, well, I showered already, but the hat he had on, I reacted to the hat, and he got mad and he chunked it at me. And he was like, it's always something with you. Like, there was a lot of that.
I remember my husband questioned me when we got out of mold, when we finally figured out it was mold, and he had gone back into the townhouse that we lived in to check on remediation. And he came home, and I had already started to feel better. I was feeling better. And he walked in, and immediately I started to feel horrible. And I was down for 3 days after. And he was like, there's no way you're reacting to me. And I was like, I am telling you, yes, I am. And he just thought because he told me he went into the environment that it was all in my head. But then his instructor, an instructor in the industry, actually, and I was so thankful that he told my husband this, but he was like, oh no, that's a real thing, hypersensitivity after mold. And your wife obviously now has that. So you have to be very careful.
Right. And we didn't have anybody to give us wisdom like that. And so he would go all kinds of places, and I would tell him, and he'd be like, seriously, I have to shower again. Like, it was like, seriously, I have to shower again. Like, really? And it just was very intense and stressful to have a person in the entire family that is the sick one.
And then when you're sick, I'm sure, because I mean, Josh will even tell people, he's like, my wife didn't sleep with me for like a year. You know, you lose all interest. You don't, and that takes such a big burden on your marriage.
Yeah, it affected us every which way you can think of, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Like the sex life, there was none. I even was reactive to him. And so that puts a huge strain on a marriage. And we both were in dark, lonely places, but we were in dark, lonely places on separate playing fields. So it's like, he was the person that was healthier. You know, I know that he still struggled mentally with things, but he wasn't physically affected by the mold. And so he was in a dark place, feeling abandoned and feeling alone and feeling like the only one that can provide. And then I'm lonely over here I'm the only one that's sick. I'm the only one that's reacting. Nobody understands. Everybody thinks I'm crazy.
Yeah, I can't share part of my husband's story, but I understand that. And we've talked since, like, disconnecting from your life when it's that stressful, when you've gone through mold. And I'm the sick one in our family too. Like, I was the sick one, and we had many conversations over, like, I feel like I'm the burden and we can't do literally what you're saying. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are my people. This is it. But like, the reality now for us is, like, we check each other all the time. Like, okay, I know you're super stressed. I know you want to disconnect, but is there a healthy way to do that? Because there were unhealthy ways to do that, because you just want to get away from your life. And I couldn't ever, because I was the sick one, but he could get away from our life. And he's a lineman. So much like a fireman, like, he would work out of town, right? And he would have to do his own thing. But are you guys at the point now where, like, he acknowledges that it's a very real reality for you, and you're not the burden? Like, it's hard on you too, that this is something you're going through, that you didn't choose, that you didn't pick, that you would not have walked in, to a grocery store and been like, hey, I think I'd like to have mold sensitivity today. Like, let me purchase that and put that in my life. Like, are things a little more even kill with that today, where he's kind of figuring out?
Well, it's better. It's definitely better. When, like, due to all of this, we ended up going through a divorce. And so we were separate for almost a year, and it was not a pretty divorce. And he was able to get away from it, right? So it was almost like, he said, it felt like a rebellious teenager. Like, he was able to get away from underneath the burden of everything, and was able to just go and do his life. Be able to go anywhere, to take a vacation, to go to any restaurant, to do all the things that normal people would do without having to be held back. And so he had that freedom. And then when he wanted to reconcile and try to work on it, when we first got back together, he was real understanding, and realized at that point that it's not like something I do. It's not in my head. And he understands, and he wants to just sit in the journey with me. But there have been bumps in the road. Like, just because that's spoken and that is said, there still were issues. Like, he has to give up a lot too. So the person that's sick, we have to experience it, but the person you're married to, they have to give up a lot too, like his deodorant, and I was dealing with chemical sensitivities. The cologne, he used to use Tide when we separated. He went back to, like, what you use before you get sick. And so he had to let all that go for me. And then he also is a person that if he comes in from somewhere and I start getting sick, he takes it on himself. Like, he feels bad because now he just made me feel sick. Even though he can't control that building that he went into still bothers me, but he still takes it on himself. Like, he's the reason now I'm feeling sick. And so I think we both at times feel like we're a burden for each other, if that makes sense. So it's getting better. I mean, it's been a year that we've been back together and we're working on reconciliation, which the only reason this is happening is because of the Lord, because he had already the new woman in the family. And so, God changed his heart, convicted him, and he came back. And it's still an everyday battle for us. It's not something that just goes away. But he's trying to be more understanding. And it's not an easy road for either person.
My husband and another one of our good friends, they went through mold, and this weekend we had them over and we were laughing. We were listening in, totally eavesdropping on their conversation. And we started laughing because they were literally what you just said. They're like, we need to go and we need to sit around a campfire and we need to just wash all of our clothes for one weekend in Tide so we can smell it. And we're going to spray cologne all over us and we're going to smoke a cigar and we're going to do it all while we're sitting there. And then we'll go like deep clean somewhere and then go home. And we were dying laughing because like you just said, they can't do any of that anymore. And they were dead serious. They're like, no, really. And we're going to eat all the food that has gluten and dairy in it. And
Totally. And it's like, people like friends don't get it. Like even my mom had a hard time wrapping her head around that I can't go in her house because they removed the mold, but she didn't replace anything. And I struggle. I really believe that she still has a mold issue somewhere else in her home, but she's in denial. And I watch their health fade. And, my mom still can't wrap around, well, why don't you just take something of mine? I'm like, I don't want to take anything of yours from your home. Your home doesn't make me feel good. So it doesn't just affect, like your husband's, it affects your family and it affects the relationships that you have with them. And my dad has an RV that's so moldy because he's had a lot of water damage. And he's just like, I ain't bothered by it. And I'm like, well, that's good. I'm glad you're not, but I am. And so we just do things outside. And it's a very strange way to have a relationship when you've been affected and you're the only one affected by mold.
Affects, all of your relationships, everybody, especially if you're now a canary and you can't go into their house without having reactions.
Right. And it's weird because like we have a neighbor that moved in across the street and I love them to death. And it's like, I don't know what to say because they want me to come in their house and I don't want to be like, well, I'm the crazy one and I can't be around mold. I can't do this. I can't do that. Who wants to hear that as vomit for the first time you meet somebody when they know nothing about you? And so it makes meeting people different. I mean, it just, and like, it's like I told Bill, it's like, we almost have PTSD when it comes to water. It's like, we had water issues in this home and we both deal with the PTSD differently. He shuts down and it gets overwhelming because now he's like, great, this house is ruined and she's going to be sick. And, and I respond with, we just got to fix it and make it better. And we'll, do whatever it takes to clean it and make sure that we don't have a mold problem. So we still both, have this almost like anxiety over our home not being safe anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I just feel like there's so much with mold that it's just, you're not the norm anymore. Like you see people that are out there and they're living normal.
But you also see now the people that think that what's happening to them is normal when most likely it could be mold. And they think that that's just how they're going to be the rest of their life. And they're just going to continue to get sicker and sicker because they never will look into what's the root cause of causing them to feel that way.
Right.
I think that that's a positive about people that go through mold is that you start to actually then recognize, and like you actually helped a friend identify that it was mold being the root cause for her two sons to lose their ability to even walk. Right. Had you not gone through what you've gone through, where would those boys be today? I mean, that's amazing.
That is true. I have to look at it that way because sometimes when I got to tell this person that they maybe should think about that they have mold in their house because I see the child's behavior and I see the dark mold eyes. And, you know, it's like, oh, do you even want to open that door? But because it is so devastating and it is so difficult of a road but I won't want these kids to continue to be sick. It's just learning through this journey how to handle it. And that the friend that you talk about, it's like, I knew her prior to, so I felt in a way safe to say, hey, this is going to be a road that's going to be hard. And this is going to be a road that you're going to need lots of support and love. And, but if it's mold in your home, it's not only going to be financially draining, but it's going to affect your marriage, and it's going to affect your relationship with other people. Because I feel like I would have liked to have been told straightforward and honest how hard it's going to be.
What support system did you have while you were going through all of this? Because we talked about it's impacted, right? Your marriage, your family relationships.
I had none.
Did you, what kind?
When I found out about it in 2018, I feel like it wasn't spoke as much. I feel like now you see it more. And I know that people struggled with mold and toxic mold, even not just Staphylococcus, but other molds, but you just didn't see it. And so I didn't know where to go or where to turn. Honestly, I just dove into like Facebook mold groups and tried to follow people that were familiar, that have walked this path and have learned what's good and what worked and what didn't work, and then try to figure out which is best for my family. But when your mind doesn't work well and you have so much brain, it's so overwhelming to know what to do. And we screwed up over and over again. Like, we kept making the wrong decisions. And it's like I didn't feel like I had any support.
Did you suffer from a lot of depression because of it?
There's times that I don't feel like I suffer from depression. I isolate. I think that's like my depression. I just got real quiet. Like, I didn't hang out with my friends anymore. Like, it just, so I don't know that I wasn't necessarily diagnosed as being depressed. I just kept to myself, and I just turned on the survival. Like, really, honestly, what I did was I just numbed everything, and I just took day by day and then tried to figure out what to do. I think now, what is it, 3 years later? Let's see, July of 22 will probably be 19, 20, 21. 4 years from it, I'm now dealing with emotions that I didn't ever deal with when I was walking through it.
Did you, as a female, did you feel like mold kind of took away like your I can't say that word, femininity? You know, did it like just make you feel ugly and gross? And like, totally. It's like, how does my husband even find me attractive anymore?
Yeah, one of my symptoms was I gained fatty tissue all over my body. So that was why I knew something was wrong, because when I moved into the house, I was working out hardcore. I was eating very clean, and I gained 20 pounds of just fat, like everywhere, in places I've never had fat, cellulite, ever. So I always kept weight on. I could never lose weight, no matter what I did, no matter how I ate, no matter what I was diagnosed with. Like, they told me I had celiac, which I don't have celiac. That's just them not knowing that is really was the mold, not celiac, but the antibodies. But like, I have like loose skin that hangs, and like, it changed my body. It aged me. Like, my skin doesn't look the same. I have like, I don't know what the word, it looks like elephant skin, but it like hangs. And there was so much inflammation. Like, I would have inflammation, they would go away. I gained 10 pounds and I'd lose 10 pounds. And that was all just water weight. It was just inflammation. That's what my body would do. And so I felt like it took away so much. Like, I don't feel like I'm as sexual as I used to be.
Yeah.
I don't feel sexy.
I honestly feel the same way. I feel like mold just stripped me of like everything I use. My confidence just,
Yeah.
I didn't want to wear makeup. I didn't want to get dressed up. I didn't want to brush my hair. I didn't want to wash my hair. I would go for days, even after mold, without taking a shower. Cause I was like, I don't care. Like, I just lost the sense to care to even look presentable. Cause I was, it's just,
Yeah, because it's frustrating. It's like you try to lower your toxic load and then you try to like research which is the best stuff to wear and do. And it's just a lot. I think it was so overwhelming that I was like you, like I would shower, but my hair would never be fixed. Like I probably haven't blow dried and straightened my hair in years. I just throw it up. And like my husband will say, when I met you before, you were always dressed up. You were always in heels. You were always, putting on your makeup and doing your hair and wearing your jewelry. And, you smelled so good. And it's like, I don't feel like I can be like that anymore.
You're not alone. You're not alone at all in that. I had on like a horrible smelling essential oil the other day. My husband walked by and he's like, "Oh, that smells really good." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me right now?" And he's like, "You haven't worn perfume. I miss you wearing perfume. It's been like 5 years." I'm like, "This is basil. This is basil and thieves together. This is not supposed to smell like a perfume. That's supposed to be like, hey, baby, like, oh, we have hit a new low. Like, I don't even know." But you're not alone. Like everything you were saying, I know Emily said she can empathize with, and so can I. It took a very, very long time to get out of leggings, and I'm still in a bag.
Right. Right. Like yoga pants. So like my skin was affected, like edema. And so like I just wanted to wear yoga pants because when my skin decided to swell, it didn't hurt.
Yes.
So
oh yeah.
my husband's like, "Can I see you in besides yoga pants?" I'm like, "No, I hurt. Like I hurt. No." Oh.
I would walk around in my husband's clothes because I didn't want to go buy new clothes because I lost them all. And but then again, I also didn't want to be seen, so I just like oversized shirts. And he was like, "Can you at least wear your clothes? Like, put some color on. You're starting to look like a man."
That is true.
Put a belt. Make it a dress. Put a belt around it. Make it a dress.
Okay, so it's not alone because I would wear his clothes because I would feel swollen and 6 months pregnant and puffy, and my clothes were tight. And then that would like almost make me feel like, well, this is sad. Like what people think I'm pregnant and I'm not pregnant. It's like, this is terrible. I hate it. Well, I've been told like I got very negative through this process, and I'm still having to work on changing my mindset. It is still a process for me to not be so negative, to think of the positive, to look at the positive.
Yeah. And to look at the growth, right? Like our family's big on growth mindset, or we become big on growth mindset. And that's huge. Like to look at where you've come from and what you're doing now, and not just comparing to how it's different, but okay, but this is still good. This is still happening.
Right.
It's hard though.
Right. It is hard. It's
and
hard.
Not only that, to show your children that life isn't fair. It's not easy. Y'all separated and y'all came back together. You're showing your children that y'all can work things through and work things out. So you're I feel like you're also really helping your kids just remember that, you can work through things. You just have to have two people that are willing and able to do so.
And to commit to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The youngest, I feel like, has probably been more affected by this journey, because he'll be like, "Mom, do you think there's mold in the house?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, still say that out loud." Like I think he might be like any of the other 6-year-olds, in his class, because they did not live this life that we are having to do and what we did do. So it's like, you think that it just affects you and your husband, but it trickles down.
I ended up calling another mom and like tearing up the other day. My daughter, they just started a new school, and there ironically is another family that we're getting to know. They went through mold as well in it, which we didn't know until we had started the school. But my daughter came home and she was talking to her sister about how she traded food in her lunch with somebody at lunchtime. And I started to panic because she is our super sensitive one to like anything now. And she has a million allergies. And I stopped and I said, Brooklyn, honey, you can't switch food with anybody. No, mom, it was with these two girls who also went through mold. She goes, we can switch food because we have the same allergies. And like, I remember just crying because I'm like, that's her still being able to be a normal kid. Like she can still switch food with them. They have the same allergies. And I forget that. Like, it's a big shift for them.
Right. And that's good because I don't, Kyle, like, should be like you said, Brooklyn. Kyle is like that. Yeah. Like we are going through like all kinds of trying to help him, but yeah, like a lot of foods create behavior problems in him. So his isn't like me where it's like his is mine. So it's like toxic to his brain. And so he goes into like hyperdrive behavior, can't listen, ADHD. Like I just could say he's off the chain. That's the best way I can describe it. Like he's just off the chain. It takes like a day or two for it to process.
Are you sorry, I was going to ask you about your son because you're talking about him being hypersensitive. Do you have panic or anxiety thinking about him going and staying the night at a friend's house, or have you let him?
We haven't yet. No. No, not yet. No. Now my oldest has the same neighborhood that our home, had the mold. His buddy lives in that same neighborhood. They have mold going out their vents, but they're not even, Bryce will say, my oldest will say, they're not even sick. They're not affected by it. And I'm like, well, you don't know that 100% because everybody has different symptoms that they just don't relate it to the mold growing out of their vents. So he'll go over there, but we come home and we have to do the whole, like, you got to shower, you got to wash clothes. Now it's better now today than what it was 3 years ago. So it's not as bad. I just know that the home is not clean. And so I still want to wash the clothes a certain way. But my oldest doesn't seem to be bothered by living in the home. He doesn't seem to have health problems. So I'm not as worried about him going over there and staying the night. Now, Kyle, it may be a different story, but we haven't gotten there yet. Not yet.
I had a mom just go after me because I wouldn't let my son sleep at her house, and she got so angry, and she's like, "I'm mold in my house." I was like, "Yes, you do." And she's like, "Well, you let him come in my house to eat," and I was like, "Yeah, for like an hour. That's different,
Yeah.
Him sleeping there for 10 hours and being exposed." But anyways.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Because I think when I get to that road, I probably will have a problem too, because I actually was doing really well. And I went into a friend's house to just see, and it ended, I stayed too long. Like I knew immediately and I didn't get out. And I stayed for like 2 or 3 hours, and it set me back a lot. And I thought to myself, and it affected my family and it affected everybody. And I thought, okay, I want to help others and I want to give my heart to them, but I can't at the expense of my health, because I realized at that point, it took me months and months to get back to where I had gained so much. Like it kind of knocked me on my feet pretty bad. So, Bill was like, my husband was like, we can't do this. Like we can't go forward and then you go into somebody's home because you want to help them and then us go backwards. So I can respect that because I've got to take care of, my family.
That was, my mom went through Hurricane Harvey, and that was one of the hardest things because for the first time in my life, I couldn't go help her. I couldn't.
Yeah. Right.
And, and that's one of the things that it just sucks is that, just like you said, you can't risk setting yourself back by going into an environment that's going to cause you to react.
Right. Right.
So
it's hard.
Because I used to go over and help them build fences and do whatever they needed. And now I was like, I can't go over there and help tear things out and help you rebuild. Yeah.
Right. Because it's like we work our bodies better. And I'm praying that there'll be a day where I'm not affected by it, that I'm healed and I can be in the environment and not, set me back 6 months. I don't know if that's realistic, but that's my prayer.
Well, and you also don't want it to further trigger anything that you could develop either.
Right. That's true. Like
Issues. Very serious.
it is very serious. It's very serious, and I don't feel like people take it seriously. Like right now, we're in the process of trying to figure out how to build a home. Because during the divorce, my husband built this home, and it's not. It has a lot of materials in it, like formaldehyde, that's not good for me. So we're in the process of trying to build on the 50 acres that we have, and it's like I feel lost. Like, where do you go? Where do you start? How do you do this? And I feel like I'm not alone in knowing what to do. So I am so thankful for. I'll be honest, when I saw this nonprofit of Malachi's message, I thought, this is amazing because it's a resource for people. And that like I didn't have. And starting over and over again was probably the hardest thing, is to tell your children, we have to get rid of your stuff that you love. And that we can't replace it all at once because we don't have the money. So it's wonderful that y'all are fighting and you're helping so many people. Sorry.
I'm not going to cry. You already made me cry before this interview. I'm not crying anymore.
About to cry a few times. Keri, okay, so we're gonna regroup. So what is one thing, like just to end this for people, what is one thing you would remind people about as they look at their, probably specifically marriages, and they're going through mold? What is one piece of advice you would give them?
I would probably say the biggest thing to do is just be supportive. Just sit with each other in the moment. Even if you think it's crazy, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't feel it, just be present and just love each other. Because I don't know, I just feel like just let it go. Like, just be there for each other. And don't be at war. Like, don't be each other's enemy through this battle.
I know this is going to help. Seriously, this is going to help so many people, and it's going to help for people that are in it. Just a reminder, their marriage, they're not alone, right? Like, a lot of marriages are going through so much tension because of mold. And for people that are on the outside listening in, like, just be reminded that your friends and your loved ones that are going through mold, they're not just going through just mold. Like, their marriages are in tension, their relationships are in tension. Like, step in and just be there with them. And if you don't know how to help, ask, because they are not just going through the physical stuff. Like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, like we've just heard today. So Keri, thank you. Thank you so much for being real and honest and raw about how this has impacted your life and your story and your relationships. People need to know that. So we just really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.